Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Charles Michaud, and this is the George Washington Carver Society. I really appreciate you tuning in today. And before I get started, what I'd like to do is give thanks for this wonderful opportunity to speak to you today. I want to thank Mr. Fred Rushing for his vision of WAEN. And also, I would like to thank Miss Betty Craig, who carries the torch of light for all of us each and every day. The George Washington Carver Society is about the positive self-image. And to have a positive self-image, you must have a sense of your history and your heritage. You know, our history, black history, is quite amazing. And each and every month, I want to come and talk to you and give you some facts and share some ideas about our history, our heritage, and some of the truly great Americans that we can draw inspiration from and share with our children and grandchildren and friends and family and other people as well. You know, when I think about George Washington Carver, it gives me inspiration each and every day of my life. George Washington Carver, born into slavery, never knowing his mother or his father, never knowing the actual date of his birthday, traded for a horse at 12 years old. I ask myself, how was he able to achieve all of the wonderful, great accomplishments that he was able to achieve? And I've studied the life of George Washington Carver for close to 30 years now. And I've discovered something about him. Dr. George Washington Carver is the most accomplished American of the 20th century. His accomplishments are so many that I could be here for 3 weeks talking to you and telling you that he did this and he did that, and we can just go on and on and on. You can take John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, and put them all together and combine their accomplishments, and yet they still fall short of the great Dr. George Washington Carver. Some of his accomplishments. In 1918, the great inventor Thomas Edison offered Dr. Carver $200,000 to come work for him at an annual salary of $100,000. Also, in 1943, George Washington Carver, they made a movie about his life in Hollywood. George Washington Carver had 325 global products from the peanut alone. He had 155 products from the sweet potato. And when I say global products, what I'm saying to you is his products were selling in Russia and China. George Washington Carver is the only American that has 2 U.S. naval ships named after him. He's also the only American to have 2 U.S. postage stamps in his image. He also has a 50-cent piece. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools across America that bear his name. He has a 50-cent coin. And I would invite you to go to eBay and try to purchase it, and I promise you, you won't be able to buy that 50-cent coin for 50 cents, which is a good thing. I want to share a story with you, it's a true story, about another man named George. And this man, his name is George Duncic. And he had a dream, just like George Washington Carver had a dream. And George Washington Carver said, "Where there is no hope, there is no vision." So this George Dunsink, he's born poor, but he has a dream. Now his dream is to become a teacher someday. But he has no money. He has no connections. But he believes in the teachings of Jesus Christ. He believes that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And each day of George Dunsink's life, he dreams. And as he dreams, there is hope. He dreams of one day becoming a teacher. This is during the Depression, when there are no jobs. And I said George had no money. He didn't have any connections. But he had a dream. And his dream was that one day he would become a teacher. And George Dunsink did whatever he needed to do to make money, to earn a living. He worked on a golf course. He carried golf bags. He carried ice. He washed cars. He delivered papers. He shined shoes. And he applied to college. And one day, George realized that he was a student at the University of Berkeley in California. And he kept doing what he was doing. He kept hustling. He kept his dream alive. He kept hoping. And one day, he realized that not only was he attending the University of Berkeley, but he was now a senior about to graduate from the University of Berkeley in California. And on one particular day, his professor made a special announcement to the senior class. And the professor told the senior class that they were going to do something different this year. They were going to have a math exam, and the student who scored the highest on this math exam would be offered an assistant teaching position with the school. Now, George's dream is to become a teacher. He saw this announcement as his prize, as his dream coming to fruition. And so George, he was a good student. He studied and he studied. And the night before the exam, he stayed at it. He kept the light on. And he kept studying and he was studying and studying. And as fate would have it, George fell asleep. And when he awoke, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. And the test had begun. And the devil came and started talking to George, and he said, "George, who do you think you are? You weren't going to pass that test anyway. Just grab a cigarette and forget about this one." But George kept his faith. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. An idea was planted in George's mind, and the idea was, George, you are just late, that's all. The professor is still there. He's waiting for you now. Run to school. So George ran out the door. He ran to the school. And as he entered the classroom, his fellow students were all leaving. And when they saw George, they laughed at him. The professor looked up from his desk and he saw George and he said, "George, you are late." And George apologized and he said, "Professor, I'm sorry I was late. But I'm here to take the exam." So the professor, he gave George the exam paper, and on the physical paper there were 8 questions, mathematical questions. And then there were 2 questions on the blackboard. After about 45 minutes or so, the professor said, "George, are you almost done?" And George, he shook his head, he looked up and he said, "Professor, I'm going to need a little bit more time." And the professor looked at his watch and he said, "George, I really have to go." He said, but I'll tell you what. He said, when you're done, he said, take the test paper and stick it in my mailbox, and I'll see you on Monday. And the professor left, and George is all alone in the classroom. And he answered the 8 questions on the test paper, but there were 2 questions on the blackboard that were really giving him a hard time. Hour passed by. 2 hours passed by. George's eyes fill up with water. The janitor walks in. He looks at George he's got a mop in his hand. He's looking at George like saying, son, shouldn't you go home now? But George keeps his faith. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then, in that moment, George was able to answer one of the questions on the blackboard. And so now he's finding his confidence. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Another hour passes, and George answers the second question. And he's exhausted. And George takes the test paper and he sticks it in the professor's mailbox, and he goes back to his little room. Sunday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. George, open up the door. It's me, the professor. And George has on his underwear. He's half asleep. He goes to the door. He sees the professor. He looks at his watch. He says, Professor, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's Sunday. What are you doing here? And the professor said, George. The professor was out of breath. He said, George, you don't understand. He said, you came in late the other day. He said, you didn't hear what I said. He said, I told the rest of the class that it's been nice having you as students. And for your kicks, I'm going to put up 2 of the unsolved questions in the history of mathematics. And you can play with those for the rest of your life. And maybe in 30 years, one of you will be able to answer one of these 2 questions, which, by the way, Einstein could not answer. George, you answered them both. And I'm here to tell you that you got a job Monday starting as my assistant teacher. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. Well, let's look at another life. That's a true story, by the way, folks. Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods' father, Earl Woods, came to golf late in life. I believe he came to golf in his late 30s or early 40s. He loved the game so much, in fact, that in his garage he had gotten a net, and he used to work on his swing every day as Tiger sat in the high chair. At 3 years old, Earl Woods had a set of golf clubs made for Tiger Woods. He really loved golf, and he wanted his son to be a golfer. And every single day of Tiger Woods' life, his father told him, he said, Tiger, you are going to be the greatest golfer in the world. He programmed his son. Your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. His father told him every day, he said, Tiger, you are going to be the greatest golfer in the world. Now, you know the rest of the story, so let's move on. Here's a power thought. If you study a subject for 15 minutes every day, at the end of the year, you will be an expert in that subject. So let me say it again. If you study a subject for 15 minutes every day, at the end of the year, you will become an expert in that subject. If you do this for 3 years, if you study a subject for 15 minutes every day for 3 years, you will be one of the top people in the world on that subject. I'll say it again. If you study a subject for 15 minutes every day for 3 years, you will be one of the top people in the world on that subject. Now, I have a question for you. Before I ask you this question, though, I want to go back to my statement. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Okay? What would you become if you knew you would not fail? What would you do? Would you start a business? Would you go to law school? Would you go to med school? Would you become an engineer? What would you do if money wasn't the issue? What would you become? That's the question for you. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, one of my favorite passages in the Bible is in Exodus when God is talking to Moses. And God says to Moses, he says, listen, I want you to go and talk to Pharaoh. And Moses said, but I'm not a good talker. I stutter. God looked at Moses and said, who made you? Was it me? Because I know what you can do. He said, who made your mouth? He said, go tell him what I said. And Moses looked at God and he said, but who should I say sent me? I am. I woke up this morning, I looked in the mirror. I can do all things through Christ. I am Charles Michaud. Who are you? What would you become if you knew you wouldn't fail? What would you become if money is not the issue? What would you become if you knew that you could do all things through Christ who strengthens you and me, all of us? You just have to have a dream and apply yourself every day. Funny story, there was this duck. And the duck walks into a drugstore. And the man behind the counter, he sees the duck walking in, and the duck says, excuse me. He says, sir. He said, do you have any grapes? And the man in the drugstore, he looked over the counter, and he said, this is a talking duck. This duck can talk. But he said to the duck, he said, no, this is a drugstore. He said, we don't sell grapes here. The duck said, well, listen, have a nice day. He walked out. Second day, the duck walks back in. He says, excuse me, sir. He said, but do you have any grapes? The man looked from behind the counter again down at the duck. He said, look, man. He said, you were here yesterday. He said, and I told you this is a drugstore. We don't sell grapes. Duck said, listen, have a nice day. Walked out. Third day, the duck walks back into the drugstore. And the man said, look, he said, if you come in here again asking me for grapes, I'm going to take your feet and nail them to the floor. Now get out of here. The duck runs out of the store. The fourth day, the duck walks back, sticks his head in the door and says, you got any nails? And the man looks at the duck. He says, no, but I got those grapes you've been asking me for. Come on in. Persistent. Apply yourself. Never give up. Without hope, there is no vision. Your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. And I can use example after example of people who start out with nothing. We can take a look at the life of Muhammad Ali, the greatest. And when I was a boy and I used to watch Muhammad Ali on TV, and Muhammad Ali used to say, "I'm the greatest. I'm pretty. I'm so pretty. I'm the greatest." And some people thought he was arrogant. Some people thought he had a big head. But that wasn't what was going on. You see, Muhammad Ali needed to program himself. He needed to create a strong self-image for himself to be in the world that he was in. Muhammad Ali wanted to be a world figure. You cannot be a world figure with low self-esteem. It doesn't work. You have to believe that you have something to give to the world. You have to believe. You have to have a vision. You have to have a dream. You have to have a dream. Not only that, you need to know your history. Muhammad Ali sought out the greatest boxer that ever lived, who is, pound for pound, the greatest boxer in the history of boxing, Sugar Ray Robinson. And Muhammad Ali said, "Man, you got to teach me how to do the Ali shuffle. Man, you got to teach me how to lay back and make those suckers miss me." And Ali educated himself. He studied with the best boxer in the world. And he said, "Man, teach me everything you got." He said, "Because I'm going to be the greatest one day." It's the same thing Tiger Woods' father said to him. He said, "Tiger, you're going to be the greatest golfer in the world." Your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. I remember reading a story about George Washington Carver, and someone had suggested to him to put in an application at a florist shop. And George Washington Carver said, "Man, are you crazy?" I think it was a white person who said that. And George Washington Carver said, "Are you crazy?" George Washington Carver said, "I did not study so long, so hard, get a master's degree to go work in a floral shop. That's not who I am." God told Moses, he said, "Tell him I am sent me." George Washington Carver said, "That's not who I am." And that's not who he was. Your self-image is very powerful. I think I have a powerful self-image. Share a story with you. I had come down to Atlanta. I used to work in Baltimore. I retired from my job. And for 2 years I did nothing but get fat. Eating and watching TV. Then one day I decided I wanted to work downtown Atlanta in a beautiful office. And I wanted to be a big shot. I wanted to be the vice president of this company. So anyway, I sent in an application with my resume, and the guy called me in, and I sat down with him, and he went over my resume, and he was impressed. But then he threw me a little curveball, and he said to me, he said, "Charles Michaud," he said, "I got 5 other people." He said, "And they're just as impressive as you." He said, "Now, what separates you from the other 5 people? What are you going to bring to the table that they're not going to bring?" And I looked at him, and I said, "This is what I will do." And I said this. I said, "I will do $1 million in revenue I'll do $1 million in sales within 1 year. I said, and if I don't produce the million, I said, I will write you a personal check for $10,000. And his brain froze. He just couldn't talk. He went into shock. And I folded my arms and I just looked at him like, and he really couldn't talk. I mean, he couldn't get it together. So I put my hand out. I said, listen, I hope to hear from you soon. And I went home. Around 9 o'clock at night, I get a phone call, and he's on the phone. And he apologizes for calling me so late in the evening. And he said, he said, my wife made me call you. He said, I told her what you said about the $10,000, you'd write me a check. He said, my wife said to me, you let that man walk out of your office? She said, no, you hire him. He said, I'm going to hire him tomorrow. She said, no, I want you to call him right now. It's 8:59. I don't care what time it is. You call that man and tell him he has a job. And so he said to me, he said, you're hired. He said, you got the job. Now, the only reason I got the job was I have a strong self-image. I told him, I said, listen, I'll do $1 million in sales. And if I don't, I'll write you a check for $10,000. Now, if I don't do the million in sales, it's okay. We're still going to do the same thing. What if I wrote $800,000? He's not going to look for the $10,000 check. I knew that. But you can only talk like that. You can only behave like that if you apply yourself, if you educate yourself, if you have a dream, if you have an idea of where you want to go. Your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. One of my favorite stories is a story of a young boy, 10 years old, and he was actually in a very serious car accident. And he lost his arm in this car accident. And so he was very melancholy, very sad, didn't want to play with his friends, wanted to stay to himself, stay in his room. And his father gave him the room he needed to recover after losing his arm. And his father was really concerned about his son because his son was becoming antisocial. So his father went to see a psychiatrist, and he asked him, he said, what can I do to get my son out of this depression? And the psychiatrist said, well, what you should do is get your son involved in some sort of physical activity that you both can share in together. He said, like the martial arts, like karate or something like that. And so the father goes home and he goes in his son's room and he says, listen, he said, I enrolled you and I in a karate class and we're going to take karate together. And the boy looked up, he looked at his father, he said, Dad, he said, I really want to learn judo. So the father said, okay, well, we'll study judo. So the father enrolls his son and himself in the judo class, and there's an old Japanese teacher. They call him sensei. And so the Japanese teacher had taught this boy this move, this one move. And after about 7 weeks, every day of just doing this one move, the boy went to the teacher and he said, teacher, he said, I've been coming here now for 7 weeks. He said, you've only taught me one move. And the teacher said, this is true. He said, but the thing is, that one move that I'm teaching you, it is the most difficult move in all of judo. And I want you to master that one move. With this answer, the boy is satisfied. And with enthusiasm, he works on that one move every day, every day, every day, because he wants to be a master in that one move. Some months pass by, and the teacher goes to the boy and he says, you're really good. And the boy said, you think so? He says, oh yeah. He says, I think you should enter into the competitions. And so the boy enters into the judo competitions, and he wins his first match, wins the second match, wins the third match, fourth match, fifth match, goes to the semifinals, wins the semifinal match. And one day he realizes one day that he is going up against the champion for the championship of judo. And the match begins. The boy who is the champion is the reigning champion for the past 3 years. He's a bigger boy with 2 arms. And when the match begins, the bigger boy with the 2 arms, the reigning 3-year champion, he tosses the boy with the 1 arm. Left and right, left and right, left and right. The referee sees what's happening, and the referee stops the match. And the sensei jumps up. He says, no, let him continue. And the reigning champion runs to the boy with the 1 arm. And the boy with the 1 arm uses that one move. And he pins the champion to the mat. And now, he is the champion. And as they're riding home in the car, the old Japanese master has a big smile on his face, and he's driving the car, and the boy is so excited, and he's jumping up and down, and he says, I can't believe it! I won! I won! I am the champion! And the Japanese master, he's driving the car, and he looks at the boy, he says, I knew you would win. And the boy says, how could you know I would win? And the old Japanese master, he said, I knew for 2 reasons. He said, the first reason is, he said, that move that I taught you, he said, it is the most difficult move in all of judo. He said, and the other reason is the only defense against that move is you have to grab your opponent's left arm, which you do not have. What would you become if you knew you would not fail? I'm speaking to you. I, Charles Michaud, can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, where am I going to go? Christ strengthens me. Christ strengthened George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver said, they asked him, what is your secret? He said, I just get up each morning at 5 o'clock and I go out into the field and I pray and I ask God to guide me and help me. And then I come back to my laboratory and I work. And I work on these things. And I work and I work and I work. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I remember a story my grandmother told me about the lumberjack. Looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a man, he was 60 years old. And he was a lumberjack. And he was cutting down trees. And he had big arms and a big chest. And a flat stomach. Big legs. Big old strong man. And one of the generals for Napoleon Bonaparte saw this lumberjack off in the distance. And he looked in his binoculars and he couldn't believe that a man could be so powerfully built. So they rushed upon this man as he was chopping down a tree. And the general climbed down from his horse and he looked at the man, still just amazed at the muscles on this guy. And he said, "We need you for Napoleon's army." And the lumberjack looked at the general and he said, "Sir," he said, "I'm a free man." He said, "I'm not going to be fighting in Napoleon's army." And the general looked at him and said, "You say what?" The general said, "I'm a general." The general said, "I can have you arrested, shot, and killed." He said, "I'm telling you, you are going to be in Napoleon's army." The lumberjack put his hatchet down. He said, "Look, man," he said, "I done told you." He said, "I'm a free man. I belong to no man." He said, "You got to arrest me, take me to jail." So they took him to jail. And he's sitting in the cell. And they sent a captain to come and talk to him. Figure this thing out. So the captain goes into the jail. He sits down with the lumberjack. He offers the lumberjack a cigarette. "No, thank you." The captain says, "Look, man," he said, you're in some serious trouble here." He said, "You could be hanged or shot or spend the rest of your life in prison." And the lumberjack looked at the captain. He said, "Like I told the general, I'm a free man. I belong to no man. I am not going to fight in Napoleon's army." And the captain said, "Well, what if we shoot you tomorrow at 12 o'clock? Would that change your mind?" The lumberjack said, "Man, I don't think you heard me." He said, "I'm a free man. 12 o'clock, you going to shoot me? So be it." Well, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I thought about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Nebuchadnezzar said, "Did we put only 3 in there?" He said, "I see a 4th one, and he looks like the Son of God." "Father, I stretch my hands to thee. If thou withdraw from me, where am I going to go?" So it's 12 o'clock, and he's standing before the man who is to murder him. And the general gives the order for the sharpshooter to kill him. And the sharpshooter, he picks up his rifle, he takes aim, and then water fills his eyes, and tears begin to fall down his cheeks. And he takes his rifle and he lays it down gently. And the general runs over to the soldier and he says, "Why didn't you shoot him like I ordered you to?" He said, "When I looked into his eyes, I saw the face of God." And he put his weapon down. I think about Trayvon Martin. When I look at his picture, I can see the face of Jesus. How can you shoot somebody innocent? How can you shoot somebody with some Skittles and iced tea in their hands? He didn't have a gun. He didn't have a knife. He had some candy and a pop. Self-image. So they put the gun down, and they took the lumberjack and put him back in jail, and they tried to figure out, well, how are we going to get through to this guy? I mean, what can we do? We threatened to kill him, and Jesus steps in, stops the killing, but they threw him back in jail. So somebody devilish, somebody evil said, well, you know what we'll do is we'll put a brand on his hand that he will have to look at for the rest of his life. So they got a whole bunch of soldiers. They grabbed the lumberjack, and they had a branding iron, and they branded the initials N onto his hand. And then they said, "You're free. You can go. You're a free man." And they laughed. Ha, ha, ha. You are a free man. But for the rest of your life, you're going to see that N on the back of your hand. The lumberjack goes home. He picks up his hatchet, and he cuts off his hand. And then he wraps it up. And the general and the captain and some other soldiers, they go back to see the lumberjack. And when they look at him, they're amazed, because now he only has one hand. And the general cannot believe his eyes. And he asked him, he said, "Why did you do that?" And the lumberjack said, "Like I told you before, I'm a free man. I belong to no one." Your history, your heritage. If you know the story of George Washington Carver, like I know the story. You see, many, many years ago, I used to have problems, or I thought I had problems. But when I sat down and I took a look at the life of George Washington Carver, and then I looked at my life, looked at my mother, my father, I wasn't born into slavery. I know who my mother is. I know who my father is. I had many birthdays. My mother, I can't count the times she held me in her arms and said, "I love you." I was never traded for a horse. Never. This man, they took his mother. They took his father. They traded him for a horse that was no good. He's great. Greatest American of the 20th century. But you may not have known that. But I'm telling you today, go tell somebody. Matter of fact, go read up on him yourself. Down at the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter Presidential Library, they have a huge exhibition on the life of Dr. George Washington Carver. Greatest American of the past 100 years. Don't believe me, do your own research. There's so many wonderful people in our history, of our heritage. I speak at schools all over, and the founding fathers, the first man to die for the freedom of our nation was a black man named Crispus Attucks. On March 5th, 1770, he was shot in the chest by the British redcoats, and when he fell back, he fell into the arms of the white militia who were fighting for their freedom. And when he died in their arms, they started to cry. And they told the British redcoats, they said, "You want to fight? You got to fight." The revolution for freedom in America begins. America is established in 1776. Crispus Attucks died in 1770. And in 1770, there was no Confederate flag. And if you would have pulled one out, you would have been shot and killed for insubordination of this country. There was no Confederate flag. Tell somebody. I have a few minutes left. Before I go, I would like to say a few words and just give thanks again to Mr. Fred Rushing. I think that Mr. Rushing has a wonderful vision to provide an opportunity for people like myself to come and be with you and share some information and some ideas that may help you. I hope they do anyway. Also, again, I want to thank Miss Betty Craig, who has really taken my hand and guided me through this process of cable and teaching me about, camera shots and all of that other stuff, because I'm really just a greenhorn, if you will. And I always try to give thanks to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who went to jail 30 times so we could vote. Rosa Parks, Adam Clayton Powell. Adam Clayton Powell, had a strong self-image, man. I mean, that guy had a strong self-image. And like Muhammad Ali, people said, he's arrogant. He's got a big head. I don't think he had a big head. I don't think he was arrogant. Adam Clayton Powell passed 104 laws. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. passed more laws than any other congressman in the history of the Congress, and his record has not been broken by anybody. Look at it for yourself, and then go tell somebody. I want to thank Rosa Parks. That bus boycott went on for 374 days. It wasn't a week. It was 374 days. It was over a year that black people came together, not just in Montgomery, Alabama, but across the United States. And they said, we support you. Just like people are coming together for Trayvon Martin. Rosa Parks said, we make the road by walking it. So I want to thank Fred Rushing, Betty Craig, Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, Adam Clayton Powell, and the great Dr. George Washington Carver. And before I leave you, I want to share some ideas. I want to share my motivation. I want to share my mojo, if you will. Adam Clayton Powell wrote this speech called What's in Your Hand? And it nourishes me. It excites me. It gives me power like I've never had before. And when I look at the Bible, I can see what he's saying. And the name of the speech is What's in Your Hand? And if you go to YouTube and you type in What's in Your Hand, it'll come up and you'll see Adam Clayton Powell. And I do my own version as well. I think it's the greatest speech that was ever written. And I want to leave you with the speech today. And I hope that it inspires you, gives you power, gives you hope where there is no hope. And we must always remember that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Not me. He strengthens us. A young slave boy stood one day before the greatest ruler of his day. And God said to Moses, what's in your hand? And Moses said, Lord, I just got a stick, that's all. And God said, well, let me use what's in your hand. And God used that slave boy with a stick in his hand to divide the Red Seas, to march through a wilderness, to bring water out of rock, manna from heaven, and lead his people to freedom land. What's in your hand, brother? I'm talking to you. What's in your hand? What's in your hand, George Washington Carver? Who was so frail that he was traded for a broken down horse as a slave boy. And George Washington Carver, sitting in the science laboratory of Tuskegee, he said, I just get up each morning at 5 o'clock and I go out into the field and I pray. And I ask God to guide me. And then I bring back these little things and I just work on them. And George Washington Carver did more to revolutionize the agricultural science of peanuts and of cotton and sweet potato than any other human being in the field of agricultural science. What's in your hand? What's in your hand, sister? What's in your hand, 42-year-old seamstress from Montgomery, Alabama? I've got 10 cents in my hands. And I'm trying to ride the city bus, but they won't let me. And Rosa Parks, with just 10 cents in her hands, sparks one of the greatest civil rights battles this country's ever seen, just letting God use 2 nickels in her hand. What's in your hand? What's in your hand, little hunchback sitting in a Roman jail? I haven't gotten anything in my hand but an old quill pen, but God said, write what I tell you to write. And the Apostle Paul wrote, I have run my race with patience. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. What's in your hand? What's in your hand? I've got a string in my hand and I'm flying a kite, and way up in the heavens lightning strikes it, and I, Benjamin Franklin, discover for the first time the possibilities of electricity, just letting God guide a string in my hand. What's in your hand? What's in your hand, little boy? All I've got is a slingshot. And the enemies of my people are great and big and more numerous than we are. He said, well, little David, go on down to the brook there and pick out a few stones. Come on back. Close your eyes if you want to. Pull back that slingshot and let him go. Little David killed the biggest enemy of the leader of the giants against his people. And his people became free, just letting God guide a stone in his hand. That's right. And a few years pass, and David is a king. And God said, what's in your hand, David? He said, Lord, I got a harp in my hand. And God said, well, play on your harp. And he played, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Maketh me to lie down near green pastures. Leadeth me beside still waters. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. What's in your hand? Man hanging on a cross? I've got 2 nails in my hands. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, whither shall I go? And that man, that carpenter, 2 nails in his hand split history in half, BC and AD. And I say to you today that there is a God who rules above. Hand of power, heart of love. And if we're right, he will fight our battles and the victory will be accomplished sooner than we dreamed, sooner than we hoped for, and sooner than we imagined. I want to thank you for sharing this hour with me, and I hope that you come back and we share some time together again. Thank you.